In the late 1700s, the world was changing, while France was going through a revolution and third famine that shook the entire nation. But in 1767, a boy who was born in written history, so legendary that even 3 centuries later, his name still makes its way to present-day conversations about Grand Sumo Wrestling, or made it to Yokozuna, sumo's highest rank. And more often than not, a debate follows that. How does Raiden Tameemon, the greatest rikishi in Japan's history books, compare to Hakuho Sho, modern day's greatest sumo wrestling champion? And although a lot of fans say that comparing past rikishi to present rikishi only makes for a moot point, if the conversation focuses on collected data, it actually gives us an excellent perspective on how one can become sumo's greatest of all time. One thing to understand about sumo is that it's old. It's really old. The first set of rules of sumo establishing it as a real competitive sport dates back to the Heian period. And since the 8th century, sumo has more or less been preserved, making the sport a living artifact of ancient Japan. But even so, it's gone through some changes since Raiden's era, like the introduction of the title of Yokozuna as an official rank. In the time of Raiden, the title of Yokozuna, today's highest rank in sumo, was an honorific one, which was only given to high-ranking wrestlers who had the favor of prominent patrons. In this painting by famed artist Utagawa Kuniteru II, Raiden is pictured with several top-ranked wrestlers wearing the Shimenawa rope, used to distinguish those who hold the honorific title. Raiden is seen without the Yokozuna rope, signifying that he was never given the title despite retaining the highest official rank of the time, the rank of a Zeki, for 17 years. Not only was with 254 victories and only 10 defeats, Raiden had an awe-inspiring winning percentage of 96.2%. He had the best winning record in 28 out of the 35 tournaments. From 1793 to 1799, he even achieved a historic 11 consecutive tournaments. Raiden's unique physique might have a lot to do with his dominance. He towered over most of the sumo wrestlers in his time, standing at 197 centimeters or 6 foot 6 inches tall, weighing 373 pounds or 169 kilograms. It's also said that he had long arms and large hands that made the perfect arsenal for a sport that involves pushing your opponent out of the ring or toppling them to the ground. A handprint in a temple in Okayama, believed to be Raiden's, measures 9.4 inches from the wrist to the fingertips. Today, compared to how tall 6 foot 6 is 300 years ago, Raiden would have been at least a The best comparison for his impact on the sport in the 18th century would be the introduction of Americans in sumo wrestling in the 1980s. Konishiki, Akebono, and Musashimaru dated their Japanese contemporaries so significantly due to the size disparity that initially the Japan Sumo Association was hesitant to grant the foreign giants the highest rank of Yokozuna despite their unrivaled success. Rewind to 300 years ago, Raiden's for remarkably similar reasons, not due to the Ozeki's sporting prowess, but due to internal politics. By today's standards, Raiden's mass alone would make him competitive in the dojo, but the big question is, would he still be as dominant? Yokozuna Chiyonofuji, known for his lean, muscular build, developed new techniques to counter the steady decline of weight, attributing to a sumo wrestler's likelihood to win. In fact, the relationship between size and success is no longer as significant as it used to be. Hakuho and his fellow Mongolian Yokozuna have shown that it takes physicality and technical skill to dominate the highest levels of sumo. And much like the best of our modern rikishi, Ozeki Raiden was anything but a one-trick pony. Not only was he built like a brick shithouse, but sumo officials had to ban him from using his favorite techniques to give his competitors such as interesting. The Yokozuna Memorial Monument at Tomioka Hachiman Shrine in 1900 as the peerless Rikishi, one who was so dominant he no longer competed with his peers, a position Hakuho too found himself in during his long reign as Yokozuna. It's impossible to say who would win in a bout between history's greatest Ozeki and its greatest Yokozuna. So rather than asking if Raiden could face off against one as powerful, as skillful, and dominant as Raiden was in the 18th century, could either man have been so peerless if they could count the other among their peers?